Hi, welcome to Vicki Baird Coaching live at 5. I appreciate you taking the time to join me here. Hi, Enrique. Thank you for commenting on there. It's kind of fun to see the statements come up, and if you have any questions, as you join in, feel free to pop them in the chat, and I'll go on down there. I hope you've had a great week. It's been a fun one here. It's finally cooled off in the Northeast for a little bit. So that has been absolutely refreshing to be able to breathe. Um, I did have a couple questions that came in over email and through the messaging apps and stuff. There's so many ways to get a hold of me. Vicki Baird Coaching across all the platforms. Vicki at vickibaird.com. And yeah, that's good enough. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. And maybe you just don't necessarily want to be in the live chat. That's fine. That's great. Respect everybody's privacy. I almost said property. I'd respect your property too. I'm a pretty good guest when I visit. So the first question that came in, I'm going to read it that way I don't mess it up. Is that I have found my intuition is often not fixed in a specific time frame. Sometimes it is a past knowing that informs the present. Sometimes it's a future knowing that feels very present. I love the way she worded this. Recently, I watched the movie Interstellar, which was really good if you haven't seen it, and had an aha. Could it be possible that intuition is actually a nonlinear, non-time bound phenomenon? Anybody else hear the Muppets when that word is used? Do we sensitives experience a tesseract or tesseract like moment with our highly evolved self reporting back to us in 3D Earth when intuiting? I had to look up what a tesseract was. I did not know what that was. So go look it up, because once I looked up to the description, it's basically the square, the hologram within the square and everything. When I looked it up, I'm like, I'm not going to do this justice. I'm just going to leave it and say, go check out the tesseract. So one of the challenges with intuition, any energy perception, is that it's a non-physical communication. So we are in this linear time frame. We are very physical. We have created, I say we, like you and I were involved, well, maybe in some lifetime we were, clocks and Gregorian calendars and ways to mark our times and to be able to relate in a time frame. And intuition does not play by those rules. So her question about, could it be possible that intuition is actually a nonlinear, non-time bound phenomenon? Absolutely. Because as a soul, we are non-physical. So when our physical part of us croaks, checks out, kicks the bucket, punches the ticket, expires, transitions, passes away, however you describe it, our soul will still continue to be, because that is the eternal part of us. So it doesn't experience time. As a matter of fact, when we cross um, and are in our non-physical selves, the way it's been described to me by those who have crossed, and that's why I say matter of fact. It's not fact. It's a matter of my understanding and perception, which is fact in my life. Those who have crossed, when they've communicated to me, I may be doing a session for someone and they're like, well, somebody passed 5 years ago. I will feel that timeline, but that's because I've learned to feel that timeline. There really isn't one. I had to merge it, the non-physical with what I understand a calendar to be. But those who have crossed will often communicate to me like it's only been 15 seconds for them. So that will be our experience as well. And that can be a little confusing. So yes, it's very much nonlinear. It's not linear at all. Um, there is no attachment to the time. I'm not a physicist. I'm not going to be able to describe this in a way that science would come in and describe it. I'm interested in that, but I'm not going to be able to do that. I can just tell you from my experience, what happens is when you have an intuitive hit or you get a download, um, whether that's from your soul self. So what she called the highly evolved self. That's your soul self, your non physical being, the eternal part of you, or whether it's from angels, spirit guides, source. Um, that communication is dropped in a, how to describe it? It just arrives. It's like an instant message. It just arrives without a timestamp. And it's up to our brains and our consciousness to put it in some kind of box or some kind of filing cabinet drawer. And that will very much be based on how you perceive time, though, too, because there's such a thing as time blindness where some of people are just not aware that an hour has passed. We all experience that, but it's a real thing for some people's brains. So each one of us will have to figure out how we perceive time in our own element. So I learned early on when I was doing intuitive readings full time, what I learned to do was see someone's life experience as a timeline. And the example I use is in history class. You would learn that in 1812, this happened, in 1856, this happened, in 1775, that happened, right? Like that's how we were taught in linear fashion. And what I had to learn how to do was to take what I was seeing and apply it to their timeline. And what eventually became known to me was if something was showing up after the timeline of whatever today was in that moment, I knew, oh, we're talking about future events. Now, even though you're talking about future events or precognitive experiences, it's still really hard to nail down because then what happens is it depends on what action you're willing to take as well. So, to stick to her question for just a moment before I wander off there, because I get kind of excited about that. Sometimes it's a past knowing that informs the present. Yes. So, you are an accumulation of all of your experiences, all your lifetimes. So that is within your own, think of it as a hard drive. So you may not have a recollection of a past experience because we can't keep it all front and center. It would be too overwhelming. So what happens is in a moment where the energy is very similar to what was going on in the past, you'll have this feeling that comes through, and that's where deja vu comes from, seeing it again. You saw it one time before. Now I want to be clear that not everyone in their intuitive process or even ever will have a movie screen or be seeing things in their mind's eye. When I say you'll see it as, it would be more accurate to say you'll perceive it as or you'll receive it as. Because I know some people who, when they get their intuitive hit, it's like a voice talking to them. And that's really cool. And it's something that happens very rarely with me. So much so that when it does happen, I sometimes jump a little bit. So when I say you see, please hear it as you might just know it, you may hear it, you may feel it, you may see it, and that's awesome. So the past knowing that informs the present is when you have that awareness and that feeling of this feels very familiar. Or once you start to really develop your intuition, what can happen is, oh, I know that's going to happen, but it's not as of right now because the physical hasn't come into manifestation yet. It takes a lot of patience when you really develop your intuition and your skill sets and your psychicness to wait, because a lot will become known to you before you are going to physically experience it. So, an example, I kept getting a download that my late husband was going to pass. And when I wasn't paying attention to it, like I felt it, but I honestly didn't know if we were talking about divorce, if he was really going to physically pass. I've mentioned this before. But then I started having precognitive dreams, and I don't dream a lot because once I go to sleep, I want to be asleep. Like, just leave me alone. I want to sleep and just knock out and recharge. So, but once I had this really big dream of knowing, I thought, oh, this is imminent. And it wasn't, because it took another 3 years of his experience for that to show up. So that's an example of when it did happen, like, I had to put it aside and live my life, but when it did happen, I was like, "Yeah, I knew this." And that can bring a lot of comfort because there are no guarantees in life. And that can be fun and it can be disconcerting. So, having things be affirmed, or having what I call my track record, like there's been enough experiences of that in my life that I just trust it now when it shows up. And I don't try to control when these things are going to happen, because yeah, you want to have a good laugh with yourself, just try to control stuff, it doesn't necessarily work. And her second part, sometimes it's a future knowing that feels very present. Well, they're very similar, because it could be said that I had a future knowing that Howard is going to pass, but we all are. So I could have disregarded that. But my future knowing felt like it was in that moment. This was going to happen very soon. So there have been many experiences of that. I've met people and been like, I know you. I don't always say this out loud because that's kind of creepy to some people. So when you're developing and listening more to your intuition and doing your, maybe you're doing a card spread or a rune, or you're using stones, or whatever it is you're using for a pendulum for divination, it's really important to not get caught up on the time frame. And I fell into this trap, actually, when I first started doing sessions, without necessarily experiencing this a lot myself by going to readings and all that. I didn't do all that. Um, I fell into the people wanting to know when this was going to happen. When will I meet my loved one? When will I get that job? What does my future look like? I fell into that feeling like I was providing uh, a template almost, something that they could believe in and then go do, right? And I was seeing it. I have never said something that I'm not seeing or feeling or perceiving in some way. And there's no reason to make stuff up. Life is fantastical enough. We don't have to make stuff up. And I firmly believe that if you never lie, you don't have to remember what you said. So, but I fell into this because people seem to want it so bad, that surety, right? And then over time, I got more comfortable saying, this is what I'm seeing. That does not necessarily mean that is going to happen exactly in this way. Why? Because you are the important factor. I can see something coming to fruition in your life in, 3 months, 6 months, but if you don't get off your butt and you don't make some contacts, or you don't go study, or you um kind of phone it in, it's not going to happen. And it will likely just postpone, which is what I love about our life paths and stuff. There are certain things that are already on the timeline. Not everything is. Not everything is destined. I actually don't think things are destined. I think there are, wouldn't this be nice if, that we set up for our souls. And with no time on that, once again, because the soul is in the non physical, but also because it really depends on where your emotional and spiritual physical growth is at that time. So it's going to change the outcome if you decide not to listen to your emotions, or if you want to take a job in California, but you never research jobs in California. If it's something that you're pulling in energetically, you might still have a conversation with someone, but you still have to research this and get your butt to California, unless, of course, you already live in California, and then just stay put. So, understanding the timeline and getting more proficient at that is actually related to not having a timeline and not being attached to the outcome. I don't know if you've heard that expression, but when you're creating, or when you're working on your own evolution, your own growth, not getting attached to the outcome, what it will look like, um, when you will do it, how much you'll make, who you'll be in relationship with. Well, first of all, it leaves the fun in life. But second of all, it allows it to grow to an a larger level, and exponentially larger, because you're, again, not trying to control the outcome. And that takes trust, it takes practice, it takes maybe honing in on something that you'd like to create, but have it be a short time frame. Use things like, by the end of this week, I would like to experience this. Now, don't go picking the big, gonna experience manifestations or intuitive openings, because you also don't want to blow open too fast, because that will hurt your chakras and your wiring. So, understanding that you are a collective of all of your experiences, and that includes the experiences that have yet to come. So, for example, when I'm working with someone and we're looking at a plan for their life or their business, this is part of the reason I went into coaching, because the idea of just telling someone about their future didn't light me up. It was kind of boring. I wanted to be able to guide them in that and help them in that. And I'm really proud of the fact that a lot of my clients have been with me, some of them for decades. And I used to think, wow, I'm a really crappy coach if these people haven't achieved or moved on away from me. But I came to realize, actually pretty recently, that that's not true, because what's happened is, I get to see them through different areas of their life and their manifestations and their growth. So maybe they came to me, one woman in particular, very young, very right out of college, and we started working together incrementally. And I have seen her through a couple relationships that we had to um, work on her beliefs to get them to go, and to raise her own vibration. But then through her 2 degrees, and then purchasing a home, and then getting married, and then purchasing a second home, and now having an investment portfolio. And she's 31. I'm going to say 31, somewhere in there. And this uh, process in it, I've taught her to trust her own intuition and then to be able to understand when it's a good investment for her, when it's somebody she should date. Well, not anymore because she's married, but and what feels right to her as far as expanding her career. So we are all a work in process. You will be really good at one area. So for me, I'm really good at relationships and trauma clearing and understanding the interaction between energies and people. And someone else may be really great at marketing. Not my forte. We what is that word? Um, Subcontract that out. Not my forte. Know your lane, Vicky. So as you begin to expand in your own understanding of what a timeline is for you, you will get more proficient. All of this stuff takes works and takes work. But it should be fun. It shouldn't be like another task that you're doing. It's about getting to know yourself so well that you can feel the lineup for yourself. Like, oh, I know me. That's going to both intuitively, it feels like it's going to take me 3 weeks to do this. And physically, I know myself so well that it's going to take me 6 weeks to do it because our physical self will always lag a little bit on the intuitive part. So I hope this makes sense. Um, if you can be flexible with your timing and with whatever it is you're asking. So let's do a real life example. You would like to change jobs within the next 6 months. Okay, great. So your physical head, your logical brain has set a 6 month time. That's great. We all need accomplishment points to kind of aim for. So what you're going to do then as you sit down and get clear, what is it about the work you're doing now that you don't like? And you're going to have this be in your head, in your heart, and in your soul intuitive self. So you go with the head first because it's easy to point out what you don't like. Then you feel out what is it that I'm not enjoying about this job? What's not bringing me life force energy? And then from an intuitive place, you'd be like, okay, I might not be able to put my finger on it, but what doesn't line up with me in this job? Is it not helping me expand to my greatest potential? Great. So then what you're going to do is as you have that listed out, you're going to spend some time quietly. Intuition development and understanding the timeline and all of that, it doesn't work if you don't get quiet. And I know people want a really quick answer to all of this, but there is none. So it gets quicker if you do the work. So then what you're going to do is take that quiet time. You can be on a walk, you can be driving and asking yourself this in meditation. You're going to ask what matters to me, what feels right. And you're going to do it on all three levels. You're going to do the brain, you're going to do the feeling, and then you're going to say intuitively, what do I feel like I want to experience in this lifetime? Because a lot of the time, your soul communicating to you, your guides communicating to you, and ascended masters, angels, source, they're going to come in through your feelings and they're going to come in through non-time related communication, and it's up to you to then feel it out to see where would that fit in the 6 month period. It's okay to have those time frames. Don't rush this stuff. Stop being in a hurry. And then as you go through this process, you'll begin to trust yourself a little bit more. And then When it comes time to applying for jobs, you're going to do the same thing. You see that listing, you're going to ask yourself, is this something that lines up with me? Does this feel like it would be a good fit? Because what you're doing is you're flipping it. You start in the logical and you invite in the intuitive, and then you get really practiced in the intuitive part, and then you bring the logical back in. Okay? Because they work in concert with each other. So if you have your logical brain and your intuitive self working together, decisions are easy. So then, as you go through this process of getting more comfortable with time, intuition being nonlinear, and yet time is still an illusion, but linear, you will be able to trust when you take the steps in this instance of going for a job and going to the interview, following through on the process, you'll be able to trust whether this is the place for you or not. And all of this takes efforting, but the effort is a remembering because you already know how to do this. Most of us just forgot where we put it. And it usually does take asking these questions of ourselves, wondering if intuition is something I have. You do. If you have a heartbeat, you have intuition. And is it something that I can then grow and trust? Well, that's up to you. If you don't want to put in any of the effort, then no, it's not going to grow. It's not. It's just not. So, um, when you combine the magic of energy and intuition and nonlinear time, it gets to be more fun to be human. The other thing is, you can stop beating yourself up when something doesn't happen. I I know that there are we can call them interventions. There are powers and energies that will interfere when it's not in our best interest to head in a direction. So um, when you are employing all of your skill sets, you can then stop beating yourself up for something that didn't come to be or didn't show up in your life. And then maybe you ask questions of, okay, this didn't happen. What is it that I'm missing? What is out of alignment? What else do I need to do? Because we are physical beings. We do need to be in action in our own lives, and that gets to be fun too. I would love for people to stop beating themselves up so much when something doesn't come into fruition, because unless you just sat around and did nothing, there's a reason and you may never know it. So when you become grateful that something didn't come to fruition, you will likely also look back on it retrospectively and be grateful it didn't happen. I mean, a lot of us have relationships that we can look to and and affirm that, like the song "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers." So when you are expanding and becoming more intuitive, more sensitive, more empathic, and more receiving of energy, you will you can have an interaction with your soul that ends up being a back and forth conversation. And it's important to recognize that you're talking with self, not the voices in your head. But you'll develop that dialogue of, is this in my best interest? There have been opportunities that my physical self, oh, my human self wanted to jump at so much. And I could feel my soul self being like, nope, we are not doing that. And that leaves my human self to say no, thank you to the others, which can be uncomfortable at times. But I truly believe that it's always worked out in my best interest. So don't get caught up on time frames. Pay more attention to how you're feeling and pay attention to those moments that feel like deja vu because they are. And pay attention to um, when something comes up in a like a live, a present moment memory. So what I mean by that is you're actually having the dialogue and you feel very present in where you are, but there's also something coming up that's reminding you of where you've been. And that can happen to be like, don't go down that road again, right? This relationship has all the red flags of the previous one. And that would be an example of a present day experience, and yet there's an intuitive hit coming from your past. So I like to think of it as I want to be kind to my future self. My now self is important, and being present and understanding my past self and healing my past self is very important. Um, but I want to be kind to that future part of me in the same way that don't eat dairy, Vicky. It doesn't agree with you. That's being kind to my future self. So thank you for sending in the question. I went, as I usually do, a little long on one question. So I'll save the other questions for next Wednesday. If you'd like to send ahead a question, and because you're not comfortable being in chat, fantastic. Send me a direct message or Vicki Baird Coaching on all the platforms. Vicki at Vicki Baird uh, will get to me, vickibaird.com. And or go right to the website and fill out the contact form. And either Enrique or myself will get back to you. And it'll show up on a future um, telecast or live or whatever these are called. Thank you for joining me. I do wish you the best of weeks, and I will see you again next Wednesday. Take care.